મને કઈ વ્યવસ્થા કરી આપો ને તો બેસતો નહીં. શું આવ્યું ડ્યુટીમાં? This meeting is being updated.
We are just starting in 1 or 2 minutes. Thank you all for joining.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
दीदी हमारे 3 बजे की क्लास होती थी, चाय भी नहीं मिलती थी।
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much for joining today. Am I audible to everyone?
Yes.
Thank you. So let's begin with some prayers. Om Ajnanatirmirandhasya Jnananjanishalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shrivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna. So I welcome all of you to this discussion on Mindfulness the Bhagavad-Gita way. So I'll begin by, we will be having a PowerPoint which I'll be sharing, and we will be discussing, broadly speaking, on 4 points today. And as we discuss this, after each section, some of the sections will be short, some will be a little longer. So after each section, I will have a brief pause, especially after every major section. Am I audible? Okay, thank you. After every major section, I will have a pause and we can have questions. And at the end also, we will have some further questions. So let's begin. This is what we will try to cover today. We may be able to cover 4 of these, if not all of them. So what is mindfulness? Then what is the Bhagavad-Gita? How does it relate with mindfulness? And what does the Bhagavad-Gita talk about the mind? What exactly is the mind? And then how does the mind work? And what makes us mindless? Assessing the state of our mind, that maybe we will not be able to discuss today. We will discuss the next session. And I will also give a map of what we are going to discuss in our next 3 sessions also. So now, what is mindfulness? The word mindfulness is very common. If you search, millions of hits on it, hundreds of books have been written. And Google has an Ngram viewer, which how frequently words are used. So if you see 50 years ago, the word mindful was not at all common. Now it has become very common. And one reason for that is that the mind is troubling us more and more. And what now, mindful has many different meanings. There are different forms of mindfulness in psychology and self-help. But broadly speaking, it means two things: to be aware of our situations and to be aware of our emotions. To not get carried away by our situations and to not get carried away by our emotions. To be aware of them. Rather than simply getting angry and acting out of anger, okay, become aware that you are angry. And then once we become aware that we are angry, then we can process anger appropriately. So to mindful also means also, okay, right now, okay, I can see some tension in my body. To become more aware ourselves physically, make more aware of ourselves in terms of our surroundings. What happens by this is that we learn to not overreact to situations, to not get carried away by situations. So to ensure that whenever we are facing challenges in life, the mind doesn't make the problems worse. Mental health challenges are among the most widespread challenges in the world. And of course, presently, because of the pandemic, the whole world got consumed in battling with the virus. But what was overlooked during the process is the toll on mental health that was taken by the sudden disruption of life for millions of people. Because if people can't go out, people can't be with each other as they would normally, the sudden change, being cloistered, all this has effects on the mind. One of my friends is a mental health care provider in California. And he told me that they have helplines where people who are very disturbed, people who are on the verge of suicide sometimes, they call for help. He said in the last 2 years, almost every day he has been getting 3 or 4 times more the number of calls than he had in the past 20 years of his career. So anyway, mental problems were high, but it has become higher. It has become worse. So our situations and our emotions can overwhelm us. And probably the most tragic, overwhelming of situations and emotions is when a person ends their life. So nowadays, there is an attempt to try to understand suicide also a little more, we could say, compassionately. In the past, especially in Christian tradition, if somebody committed suicide would be considered to be a sinful activity, to end one's life. And because it was considered sinful, that person would not get a burial in the church. And that's the idea that that soul would not be delivered. So in fact, if somebody committed suicide and failed to commit suicide, that was considered a crime. And the person who failed to commit suicide would end up in a jail. So, but what happens in suicide basically is that the mind is attacking the body to the extent of destroying the body. See, it is not that the situation itself is always unlivable. There may be other people in that same situation. Say somebody has a very painful breakup in a relationship, somebody loses their job, somebody has got a terrible disease, somebody's in financial disarray. Yes, all these are very difficult situations. But one doesn't have to end one's life. But what happens is the mind starts speaking from within. And if we are not aware that it is the mind speaking and discouraging us and degrading us, then we get carried away. So being mindful is not just like, an additional skill I need to develop. It is a vital life resource. The word mindful may not be common, but learning to manage our mind is a vital life resource that we need. It may literally be a matter of life and death. Many of us may not think of ending our lives. So the point I was making is that it is being more and more recognized that mental health is a very, very serious concern. And nowadays, rather than criminalizing or penalizing suicide, the tendency is, try to understand what made a person take that terrible step. And what can we as a society do to prevent it? How can the individual reach out for help more and more? So understanding the mind is very important. Now, what does mindful mean? So it doesn't mean full of the mind. Mindful doesn't mean I'm full of the mind, means that whatever the mind is, whatever thoughts come up in the mind, I become full of them. No, it doesn't mean full of the mind. Mindful means be aware of the mind. There is something called the mind inside us, and sometimes it can work against us. So don't fool with the mind. I'll explain what these two things mean in more detail, but don't fool with the mind. So if we are not mindful, our mind can make us a fool. If you are not aware, we are not careful, then our mind can make us a fool. And at ordinary levels, we may waste a lot of time in oversleeping, overeating, over TV watching, over gossiping, over arguing. These may not be immediately harmful, but over a period of time, they become harmful. And they are largely because of absent-mindedness. So absent-mindedness can also be called as mindlessness. We are not aware of what our mind is saying, what we are doing. We just like in a haze, carried away. So when we are not mindful, what happens is that we do things without even being aware of what we are doing. It's as if something has taken control of us and it is pushing us to do things, and we almost been taken over. How that happens, I'll explain. But broadly, this mindfulness means to become aware of what we are doing. So the screen not fully visible. I'm getting a message. Can all of you see the screen as such? No? So what are you seeing? Strange. Are you not able to see the PowerPoint here? What is mindfulness? Earlier also you were able to see till now or no? Okay, thank you, Swasini Mataji. So, okay, thank you. That is strange. Maybe if you are on a phone or something like that, that might be a problem. Hopefully, I am doing it normally. So this is mindfulness. It is extremely important. Now, our topic today is mindfulness, the Bhagavad-Gita way. So, what is the Bhagavad-Gita? What is the Bhagavad-Gita could itself be an elaborate class, but I'm going to focus on the Bhagavad-Gita from one perspective. What does it have to do with mindfulness? So the Bhagavad-Gita is a time-tested classic. It is a philosophical book. It was spoken 5,000 years ago by Krishna to Arjuna on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. With respect to mindfulness, we can talk about three things. It dramatically demonstrates the deadly power of the mind. That Arjun was on the battlefield He was ready to fight. It was all set. It was the biggest battle of his life. It was the battle for which he had prepared throughout his life. The stakes could never have been higher. And it was not just his own safety or his own prosperity. It was for the service of human society, that there were vicious rulers on the other side who needed to be dethroned and neutralized. The Kauravas were wicked and vicious. So it was for his welfare and society's welfare that he had to fight. And at that time, suddenly, what happened? Some thoughts came in Arjuna's mind, some emotions came, and that warrior who was ready to fight put his bow aside, saying, I can't fight. It's described that he said that my mind is reeling. Nahi shaknomi avasthatum brahmati vachame manaha. Manaha, mind, brahmati, it's just wandering. It's wandering like a out of control fan or out of control device. I'm not able to focus. I'm not able to analyze. I'm not able to function. It says my bow is slipping from my hand. My skin is burning. My limbs are trembling. My voice is choking. So we could say, had many of the typical symptoms of what modern psychology could call as a emotional breakdown. So that warrior who had never been defeated in a war ended up acting as if he were defeated, putting aside his bow, unable to fight. So in one sense, there were enemies out there whom he had to fight. But those enemies didn't have to shoot a single arrow at him. It was just from inside the mind that he was deflated, dejected, and eventually defeated practically. He said, I can't fight. Give up. Give up even without a fight. So now we can go into the specific reasons why Arjun got into those emotions and was overwhelmed. That's a whole different study. But the point is, the Gita describes that what happens inside here may sometimes be far more consequential than what happens out there. That what happens inside our head can be far, far consequential. It can be far, far more defining than what happens out there. So generally speaking, we spend a lot of time in trying to arrange things properly. If we buy a new home, we'll get a proper lock for it. We may, if it's a relatively little risky area, then we may get a proper security system. We will do a lot of things to secure things in the outer world for us. But what about securing things in our inner world? How things can crumble, the Bhagavad Gita dramatically demonstrates that. And then in response to that, what does Krishna do? Krishna gives a lot of philosophical and practical guidance in the Gita. Our topic is the mind, so we'll focus on that. I'll focus primarily on the 6th chapter of the Gita to illustrate this. He philosophically explains the working of the mind. Okay, what exactly is the mind? How does it work? What is it meant to do? Krishna points to that in a way that we can analyze and learn a lot from. And then practically, it also practically aids in getting the mind to work for us instead of against us. The Gita states that the mind can be both our friend and our enemy. So, how to ensure that our mind acts as our friend and not as our enemy? The Bhagavad Gita gives guidelines for that. So, generally speaking, if you want to consider this subject, say, suppose there is a disease, now when the COVID pandemic came up. So initially, people thought, hey, is that some new disease has come up, diseases keep coming up. So when the power of that disease started being recognized, then people started taking seriously. Okay, we can't travel. We may not even be able to go out of our house. Let's lock down. So first is, we need to understand the power of it. And then we started understanding, Okay, what does it affect? It affects the lungs. It affects the primarily comes in through contact, but it affects the respiratory system primarily. Okay, then what should we do? You protect it. Maybe do steaming, do this, do that. Okay, how does the respiratory system normally work? And how might it get infected? We understand it about it. And then we take protective measures, preventive measures, curative measures, prophylactic measures, whatever is required. So similarly, if we are to learn to manage our mind, first, the Gita actually offers a 3-point program. First, understand how dangerous it is, and then understand what are the present defense mechanisms we have against it, how they work, and how we are vulnerable. And then, how do we deal with it? How to get it to work for us instead of against us? That's why the Bhagavad-Gita could be said to be a book on a manual for mind management. And specifically at the end of the Gita, Krishna says he's enlightened, but also Arjuna says he's enlightened, but also he says that he's composed. His mind has become calm. Nashto moha smriti labdha tat prasadan mayachyuta sthitosmi gata sandeha karishe vachanam tava. He says, sthitosmi, I've become well situated. My mind has become composed now. So the Gita begins with Arjuna's mind wildly out of control, and it ends with his mind becoming calm, composed, and controlled. So in that sense, the Gita is a book about mind management, about many other things, but it's also about mind management. Now, what does the Gita say about the mind? So we could go a lot more into this, but this is the broad introduction. What is mindfulness and what is the Bhagavad-Gita? And then we'll be discussing what does the Bhagavad-Gita say about the mind. But at this point, are there any questions or clarifications or comments? Okay. Hare Krishna Bal Ganesh Prabhu.
Prabhu, is there a need to separately deal with the mind as such using techniques of Bhagavad Gita, or the general practices suggested by spiritual templates like chanting or reading, those will take care of mind automatically? That means what is the what is the essential need of the dealing with it?
Okay. Is there a specific need to deal with the mind separately?
Yeah.
Yes and no. It depends on the situation. Just like I'll discuss in the next point about how there are 3 levels of reality. So just like your body, do we need to separately take care of our health? Actually, rather than thinking of the Bhagavad Gita's guideline as only being spiritual guideline, it offers holistic guidelines. So the Bhagavad Gita also says be regulated in eating, sleeping. That itself will take care of the body. But then if somebody has some specific diseases, then they may need to take specific medicines. So in general, the Bhagavad Gita's guidelines, just as they will help us to function with our body better, they will also help us to function with our mind better. They'll help us to better take care of our body and mind in general. But if there are specific difficulties, which we already have, there are specific conditionings which make our mind go wildly out of control, and then we may need to take specific measures. So if somebody has some specific issues which arouse great anger within them, which arouse great attachment within them, somebody has some addiction, somebody has some specific vulnerability, then they may have to be careful. So it's not a 1-0 thing. We have to expand our conception of the Bhagavad Gita's guidelines. So specialized methods to take care of the mind are not outside the purview of the Gita's guidelines. So spirituality doesn't just mean say chanting or doing the direct activities of bhakti. Spirituality means offering our entire being in a mood of service to Krishna for a spiritual purpose. And then to offer our entire being, we need to take care of an entire being. So if some part of our being requires special care, then taking care of that is not outside the purview of spirituality. Okay.
Thanks a lot, Prabhu. Yeah.
Thank you.
Bhagavad Gita is solution for our problems, as you told. Thanks a lot. Hare Krishna.
Yes. Purushottam Prabhu.
Yeah, Krishna Prabhuji. Prabhuji, my question is, as we are discussing on this mindfulness, and you also mentioned that sometimes the mind can act against us, right? So we also have the philosophy of our previous karmas also affect, So
Okay.
is it also correlated, Prabhuji? Like
Yeah, we'll come to
we
that a
have
little
mind,
later. We'll come to that a little later. We
Okay.
definitely will going to discuss that. But I was thinking, we basically
Okay,
focus
sir.
2 points right now, which I mentioned about mindfulness and Bhagavad Gita. If there are any questions about that, we will discuss now. What causes the scattered mind also, we will discuss in due course. Thank you. Okay. So now let's move on. So first, I discussed what is mindfulness and what is the Bhagavad Gita. So now let us try to understand what is the mind. What is the mind? Now this is a very great complexity in one sense, because the mind is both extremely real and also it seems extremely unreal. If you look at it from a physicalist scientific perspective, there is no such thing as the mind. There is the brain, but where is the mind? In fact, there are some reductionistic or materialistic philosophers like A.J. Iyer. They say that there is no such thing as a mind. I refuse to study the mind because it has no locus standi. Unfortunately, this same person who said, I refuse to study the mind, soon ended up having a severe mental health problems and ended their life as a mental wreck. So this is not a laughing matter. Within the current conceptual view of the world, within physicalist science, there is no place for the mind. Psychiatry primarily studies the brain. Psychology was originally supposed to be the study of the mind, but because science has no place for the mind, so it is often redefined as study of human behavior. And exactly what is the mind, there is a lot of confusion. However, the Bhagavad Gita offers us a more inclusive vision of reality. So it says that reality itself is 3 levels. There is the physical, the mental, and the spiritual. So now in the mental, there are many other things, but that's reality. Level of reality can be itself called as mental. Physical is normally the level of reality at which science mostly functions. So physical reality could we refer to our body is a part of the physical reality. So there are the objects that we see, touch, taste, smell. All these come under physical reality. And beyond that, there is the mental reality. And in the mental reality is where the mind functions. And beyond that is the spiritual reality. The spiritual reality is the basis of our identity. That is where we exist as spiritual beings, as what the Bhagavad Gita calls Atma. So now let's try to, so first we get introduced to this concept. So this could be explained in terms of the computer metaphor, that we have hardware, software, and user. So the physical reality is like the hardware. The mental reality is like the software. And the spiritual reality is like the user of the hardware. So all these 3 are there and they work together. So when they work together, what happens is that all these 3 contribute to coherent functioning. None of them can function on their own. At the same time, all of them are needed to function. Yeah, okay, sorry. About the screen going off. Yeah. So we can see over here. So if a person is working on a computer, then there is usually in the computer system, there's a user and the software. Now, of course, software is not something we can see, but its effects we can see. I abstract put it over there. And then there's the hardware, the physical structure, the keyboard, the monitor, and everything. So the software's results we can see. So the user is the soul. So the user is the soul, the Atma. The hardware, the body, the eyes, the ears, all these are they are the hardware, and the mind is the software. So in modern society at present, there is phenomenal development of the hardware. That at the physical level, we have tapped reality to extraordinary degrees. That's how right now, through the internet, we are having this class. So there has been enormous progress at the level of physical reality. And to whatever level we understood it, tapped it, especially tapped it for fulfilling our purposes. So we have improved the hardware enormously. And yet, we see that people are not happy. Depression levels are increasing, addiction levels are increasing, suicide levels are increasing. So why is that happening? Because while the hardware is improving, the software is worsening. We may have a very good device to function. In terms of physical hardware, we may get the premium phone or we get a premium laptop. But if the software is corrupted, we just won't be able to function. So the mind is like the software. And it's just as important to have sound functional software as it is to have sound functional hardware. So this is the 3-level reality: body, mind, and soul as hardware, software, and user. Let's try to understand it from another perspective. See, when we function in the world, this is, earlier I placed the 3 as one above the other. Now let's put them horizontally to understand how they function. So the soul is the fundamental unit of spiritual reality. Each one of us is a spiritual being, the Bhagavad-Gita states. And from the soul comes the energy of the soul, which is called as consciousness. So the energy of the soul is called consciousness. Now, that is like you could say, a light that comes from the soul, and it goes through the mind, through the body, and the body is a part of broader physical reality. So it goes outward into physical reality. Now, here there are some terms to understand, that the mind is the route, the channel through which consciousness comes. And it goes into the body, and it goes beyond the body to physical reality so that we can function. And there's the root of consciousness. The source of consciousness is the soul. So what happens essentially is that if we are to function, if we are unconscious, we can't function very well. Say, if I'm talking with you right now, and suddenly some thought comes in my mind, and then I get caught in the thought. And as I'm caught in the thought, I'm just going all over, and I won't know what to speak. Either I won't be able to speak at all, or I will speak something incoherent. So we need the mind as a channel. It has to be aware and alert so that it can act as a channel for consciousness to function. So that is, it has to come to the body, and through the body to other things, and then we will be able to function. So when we become my soul is the root of consciousness, the mind is the route of consciousness. So to illustrate this, say if I consider the mobile. Now in the mobile I have a flashlight. So if I turn on the flashlight, its lights come. So now if I consider there's a channel, so if this channel is misaligned, now the channel is still there, but the channel is pointing somewhere else, you can't see the light. But if I move it like this, I place my palm in such a way, let's say the light comes. Now slowly a little bit light starts coming. So the better the channel is aligned, then the light comes through. But if this becomes like this, the light is coming still, but it's going somewhere else. If it becomes like this, the light will go somewhere else. So when we are absent-minded, what it means is the mind is going somewhere apart from the body. The mind is going somewhere apart from the physical reality. And it goes apart from the physical reality. Then the mind becomes not a functional tool, but it becomes a dysfunctional tool. It impedes us in our functioning. So I'll explain this a little further, but first let's look at the brain. So where is the brain? Nowadays, there is an attempt to reduce all mental problems to neural problems. Neural is the adjective for the brain cells. They are called neural cells. To reduce all mental problems to neural problems. Oh, that means, if somebody committed suicide, oh, there must have been some chemical imbalance in that person's brain. And if that chemical balance could have been adjusted, you just give them some chemicals and they would have been okay. And that person would not have committed suicide. It's not that simple. The brain is a part of the physical body. And we could say the brain is the part of the physical body that interacts very closely with the mind. But the brain and the mind are two separate things. They are related, at the same time they are separate. So we could say in a computer there are many things. There is the keyboard, there is the monitor. We may have an external mouse. But at the same time, the software is stored in the RAM. So the RAM and the software are closely connected. So similarly, we could say the software is the mind and the RAM, the central functioning unit, we could say not so much the RAM as the CPU, the central processing unit, sorry. So central processing unit is the brain. That is from where functioning happens. So when some people say that, okay, the brain is the cause of all of one's mental health problems, well, that is oversimplified. What happens is that the brain is, yes, sometimes there can be chemical imbalances in the brain and they may need to be dealt with appropriately. But quite often those chemical imbalances are a result of something else wrong with the mind. They are not the cause. And that is why when people take antidepressant drugs, they may help to some extent. Some people have anxiety problems and they take some drugs and that helps them to become calm. But that alone is not the solution, because that's the symptom. It's like if somebody has acne or some kind of boils in their face or somewhere else. Now that's caused by something. You might just apply some creams to get rid of that. But if there is some deeper, maybe there's impurity in the blood, maybe there's some issue with the digestion. If that is not dealt with, they'll just keep popping up again. So the disturbances in the brain chemical imbalance, that often is a result of the mind going haywire. So the mind is not able to process situations properly, and that leads to imbalance. So to give an example for this, generally when we are happy, we smile. So if I'm happy, I'll smile. I am very happy right now. What can we do? I want to celebrate right now. So that's happiness. So we smile when we are happy. And generally, if we are unhappy, we don't smile, we frown. Now, if somebody says that, okay, what do? You're unhappy, I'll just get a machine. That machine will catch your face and twist your facial muscles so that you'll smile. Smile. Now, okay, I might smile, but is that really happiness? The smile is not the cause of happiness. The smile is the result of happiness. Just twisting the facial muscle so that one smiles is not going to make me happy. Of course, you may say that, yeah, if somebody is always having a long face, looking very gloomy, looking very dull and dark, come on, cheer up. Just smile a bit. Yeah, smiling can make us feel a little better. But if there are issues in my life which are making me miserable, then just smiling is not going to wish away those issues. Yes, it's good to smile, but it's also important to deal with the issues so that that smile is authentic. It's not cosmetic. So similarly, what happens is if somebody takes anti-anxiety pills or antidepressant pills, yes, sometimes if there is acute depression, acute anxiety, they may be taken. But that is not a solution. That has to be just one part of a multi-pronged approach. And central to that approach is learning to manage the mind. So essentially what happens when we're not managing the mind. So our mind gets distracted towards things that are not real. Our mind gets distracted toward things that are different from actual reality. And when that happens, again, that is the time when we need to learn to be mindful. So generally, we all have a capacity, a healthy capacity for imagination. So if you consider over here, see, there is the actual reality and there is imagination. Now, imagination can be helpful. Now, I'm using the word reality because when we experience it, it sometimes feels like reality. So as long as we are aware, this is the actual reality. Say a person is a builder. They buy a big patch of land and they say, okay, I'm going to build a skyscraper over here. So this is the actual reality and this is what I envision. So as long as we know the difference between what is the imagination, what is the possibility, and what is the actuality, then our mind is healthy. However, when the mind becomes unhealthy, when the mind becomes, we could say, almost insane, the mind is completely consumed with imaginary reality. It is imagination, but to the mind, it appears as if it is reality. And it is gone completely away from actual reality. I suppose there is some cricket World Cup going on. Now we may say young people, they're walking along the street and suddenly they're moving their arms and they're moving their hands. And in their mind, they're thinking that they're a cricket superstar and they're in the middle of the cricket match and they're batting or bowling or catching. And what happens is they're disconnected from physical reality. So if we become way too disconnected from physical reality, so then what happens? That's the problem. So in terms of our terms, mindful and mindless, this is the state of mindlessness. Now, when I'm using the word insane is a very strong word. When somebody becomes completely disconnected from physical reality, from actual reality, that's when they're considered insane. That person is a pauper and that person thinks I'm a millionaire and everybody should treat me like a millionaire. And whoever doesn't treat me like a millionaire, I'll attack them. Oh, then that person has to be put in the mental health care center because their mind has become very unhealthy, very sick. It can become destructive. So when we are mindless, now mindlessness can happen at various different levels. So when we become very angry, for example, when we become angry, we may hit someone. We may sometimes hit physically, sometimes we may hit verbally with very strong words. And at that time, what happens is we are aware only of the part of really, how dare this person act like this? We are aware of the wrong that they have done, but we become oblivious to the wrong that we are doing. We become oblivious. So what has happened is we are only partly aware of the actual reality. Partly, this person did wrong. I have to correct it. I have to fix it. I have to make them pay for it. But in that process, what are we doing? We are actually making things worse. So when we are mindless, we get too caught by the imagined reality. What we think is reality, what we are imagining is the reality, and we go away from actual reality. So this is how the mind broadly works. That it is meant to be like a tool for us to function. It is our link with physical reality. It is a tool for us to function, but sometimes it is a tool that malfunctions. It is a tool that takes us away from our normal functionality. Now, some people say, based on this, that they say everything is in the mind only. That, I was once at a science and spirituality convention, and there was some so-called spiritual teacher. He was saying that everything is in the mind. And he said, last 25 years, every single day I smoke and I drink. And yet I have no health problems. I have no blood pressure. I am perfectly healthy. Why? Because my mind is strong. He said, you make your mind strong and then there'll be no problem at all for you. Such people say everything is in the mind. So everything is not in the mind. And now that person gave that talk, and it is ironic that 15 days later, he got a heart attack. The first heart attack was fatal. He died. So what happens is that sometimes some activities may not have immediate results, but they do have results. So reality itself is not just a mental construct. So those who devote themselves to mindfulness, they say everything is in the mind. Not exactly. There is a real world out there, and there is a real observer in here. So how we perceive reality, how we process reality, that is a mental construct. So I'll explain what I mean. How we perceive reality is a mental construct. I'll explain that. But when we say somebody says everything is in the mind, what happens is, now suppose we are walking and maybe we are talking on phone, we are a little lost, and our head bumps against a wall, and maybe even a swelling forms on our head. Now, is the physical injury just a mental construct? Is the inner experience of pain just a mental construct, or it's all in the mind? No. Actually, the physical injury is really there. We can see a swelling over there. It's not just in the mind. And if it is a serious injury, if I don't pay attention to it, it may become worsen. It may worsen, and I may fall seriously sick. So what is a mental construct is how we process the injury and the pain. That is a mental construct. Now, mental construct, what does that mean? That means it is something constructed by the mind. It is not an actual reality. It is just something constructed by the mind. So there is injury, that is a physical damage, and there is pain, that is an inner experience. So neither of them is a mental construct. Both of them are real. We experience them as real. But what is real is that what is a mental construct is how we process them. I'll explain what we mean by how we process them. So if somebody says everything is in the mind, basically what they are saying is that among this 3-level reality, they are saying that there is nothing physical and there is nothing spiritual. It's all in the mind. Well, no. The mind plays a very critical role, but the mind alone is not the cause of the problem. The mind alone is not the solution for the problem. We have to change and fix physical things at times, and we have to fix the spiritual things. We have to raise our consciousness. So basically, when we'll be talking about becoming mindful, we'll be talking about addressing all 3 levels. Addressing the problems at the physical level, addressing at the mental level, and addressing at the spiritual level. So such problems are need to be, the mind can worsen the problems. I'll explain how. So another way to explain it is that I talked about the passageway just now. So the soul is here, the mind is here, the body is here, and the mind is the passageway, like the channel between that links the soul to the body. So consciousness goes from here. Like consciousness, I said, is like the light. It goes from here, and the experience comes back to us. So the body is a part of the physical reality. So imagine there's a wall over here, and on the wall, I hit my head. So then what happened is the injury is real, and the pain that I'm experiencing is also real. But how we process the injury and the pain, that is determined by the mind. Now, what do I mean that is determined by the mind? So everything is not in the mind, but everything comes through the mind. Comes through the mind means we experience it through the passageway of the mind. Many things may happen at the physical level, but we don't experience physical reality directly. We experience it through our mind. And it is the mind that assigns meaning to the event. So there could be one event and there could be multiple meanings to it. So when my head gets hit, I may say, oh, the world is such a cruel place. And we become resentful. Oh, why am I such a terrible? Why is the world such a terrible place? We start hating the world itself. This is a very unhealthy mental state to be in. Or we may say, oh, I am such an idiot. I'm such a bumbling fool. And we start beating ourselves up. We start feeling hopeless, worthless, and we become depressed. That's another way we might react. Another way could be, oh, if I bump my head, imagine there's a small child who is growing up, and a child bumps their head and hurts. Oh, the child will learn, okay, let me apply some medicine. Let me ask my parents to apply some medicine for this. And henceforth, let me be careful while walking. So that this is a more mature response. So what is the meaning that I'm assigning to the event? Okay, it's a bumping hurt. So let me be careful when I'm walking close to walls. That's a constructive meaning. So among these three, what is happening is only one of them is a constructive meaning. It helps us to act constructively. The other two meanings, they are destructive meanings. They make us act in ways that are harmful for us. So when we talk about mindfulness, essentially what we are doing is we are trying to find out what meaning we are assigning and to assign a constructive meaning. Let me explain what I mean by constructive meaning through a simple anecdote. So once there was a woman who came to a doctor and she said, Doctor, there's a frog in my belly. The frog is running around, round, and making my life miserable. So the doctor told me, no, there cannot be a frog in your belly. Don't worry. You might have some digestive problem. No, I've got a frog in my belly. And she was so frantic. The doctor said, okay, let's go. What is going on? Then the doctor understood that she had gone to 10 other doctors. And all of them had told her the same thing. And she realized her problem is really serious. Okay, that her problem is more mental than physical. So what happened is that he said, okay, let me diagnose. And he put her into some tests. And then just to humor her, when she came back from the test, he says, I looked at your reports and you're right. There is a frog in your belly. Thank you for believing me, doctor. So we have two options. We can do some minor surgery now and get it out, or we can do it after a week. He said, right now, I want to do it. I want to get rid of it. Okay. So the doctor had her anesthesia given to her and then did some just small surgical cuts on her belly. And then he told one of the nurses to go to a nearby pond and get a frog from there. And they got a frog from there, and they kept the frog in a bottle, in a big bottle. And then when this woman woke up after anesthesia, she said, this was the frog that was in your belly. Thank God, you saved me from so much distress. And she went away very happy. And the doctor and the medical staff, they thought it was a clever solution. We solved her problem. But she came back a week later, even more frantic with anxiety. And she said, Doctor, the frog had babies and all those babies are inside me now. All those babies are inside me. So what happened is that when the mind imagines something, then only changing the physical reality is not enough. The mind is assigning some meaning. So what happened is, okay, there's some physical discomfort. So the physical discomfort is a reality. The physical discomfort may be caused by some disease, which the doctors may be able to diagnose, which the doctors may not be able to diagnose right now. But instead of waiting for a diagnosis, what the mind does is the mind assigns its own meaning. So there are events that happen at the physical level, but the mind assigns meaning to those events. And what meaning we assign determines how we respond to it. So what happened was probably there was some disease in her belly because of which she was feeling discomfort. Now when the discomfort came back, there was no frog inside. No frog had been taken outside. The discomfort was still there. So now she assigned it to, it is not just one, there are many baby frogs inside. All of them have to be surgically removed. So we all assign meaning to the events that are happening in our life. And who assigns the meanings? It's our mind. So there is physical reality, there is spiritual reality. In between, there's a mental reality. And so when the events come, and they come to the mind and through the mind, then we assign meaning. So becoming mindful means understanding, okay, this is the event and this is the meaning my mind is assigning. But is this meaning healthy? Or should I be assigning some other meaning to it? Say, for example, we go to a get-together, a party or a spiritual get-together or wherever. And then we meet some friend and that we greet them and they just don't greet us. They just act as if you're not there only and they walk away. And then now again for this event, we could assign different meanings. Okay, maybe they were disturbed or something. Maybe they're distracted. Or we say that, okay, nobody cares for me. Nobody respects me. Nobody loves me. Everybody treats me as if I'm invisible and worthless. What is the use of my life? And that one small act of a person not responding to our greeting or not greeting us can set off a spiral of depression for someone. So what has happened is the event was not very big, but the meaning that they assigned to the event was very big. So when we become mindful, we learn to assign healthy meanings, constructive meanings to the events that are happening in our life. Now, how do we go about doing that? That is a challenge. We'll discuss that. But first thing we need to do is we need to distance ourselves from our mind before we can assign any meaning to it. What does distance ourselves mean? That the mind is inside us and we need to understand, okay, this mind is different from me. So distance ourselves from our mind by situating ourselves on a spiritual level. Say, for example, if a notification comes up on my computer, I say the mind is like a software. If a notification pops up on my software saying that, okay, your friend has updated their Facebook photo. Facebook, okay, profile photo, okay. Now, does that mean immediately I have to stop everything else and start going to that Facebook and looking at that photo, and then I look at that photo and look at 10 other photos and I spend 1 hour on that? Well, maybe that's not necessary right now. So what happens is we need to differentiate. Okay, that notification that has come on the screen, I don't have to act on it. So whatever pops up in my mind, I don't have to act on it immediately. So understanding this is critical for us to become mindful. So distancing ourselves from our mind by situating ourselves on the spiritual level. That's what we need to do to be able to function properly. And the Bhagavad-Gita tells us that if we learn to do this, Krishna says, take responsibility for your mind. Uddhared atmanatmanam natmanam avasadayet. Atmaiva yatmano bandhur atmaiva ripuratmanaha. Elevate yourself with your mind. Don't degrade yourself with your mind. So the mind can assign constructive meaning and then we'll be elevated. The mind can assign destructive meaning and we will be degraded. So the Gita says that we have to take responsibility and we have to ensure that our mind assigns constructive meaning. And how will that happen? That will happen when the first step is we learn that every thought that pops up inside me is not necessarily my thought. It's just something just popped up in the mind. So let me distance myself, let me observe it, and then let me evaluate it. Just like a software notification popping up on our laptop or phone, we don't immediately act on it. Okay, that's something just come up on the device. I will decide whether I want to act on it right now or not. And based on that, we can function properly. So this is the role of the mind in how we function in life. It's a tool for us to perceive outer reality and then to process that outer reality. So any questions at this point on this? So is the mind the way of functioning of the brain? Not at all. Now, how do we define the mind? I said the mind is the link between the soul and the physical body, including the brain. The mind is the subtle element which provides a channel for consciousness to come from the soul to the physical body and go outward. So as I said, the mind is a route for consciousness. Yes, is BG 6.5, what I quoted just now. Yes, Deepak Bharwani Prabhu.
Yeah, thank you, Prabhuji. So, Prabhuji, you said that we need to distance ourselves from our thoughts. At the same time, you also said that these may not be your thoughts. At the same time, you said we need to take responsibility of our mind. So, I just need.
I understand what your question is. Okay. So when I said that first we need to distance ourselves. Distance doesn't necessarily mean reject. Say, for example, if I'm working and I get a notification from my laptop that your power is all just running out now. Now I'll see, okay, how much power is there? Okay, 7% is there. Maybe I can work for 5 minutes more. But if it's already down to 1%, okay, then immediately I have to plug it in. So we have to respond to the notifications appropriately. But so the thoughts that pop up inside us are thoughts that are coming from the mind. I said everything comes through the mind. So now some of them we have to respond properly. So it's my laptop. So I have to take responsibility for my laptop. But that doesn't mean whatever pops up on the laptop, I have to give my attention to that. So taking responsibility means making sure that two things. Okay, let me explain this. This is a good question. Taking responsibility for our laptop means that we take care of the laptop and we take care that the laptop works for us and not works against us. So both those things have to be done if we have to function properly. So similarly, when we are working with our mind, so if I put it over here, so what does taking responsibility for our mind mean? If I'm going to take responsibility for our mind, say if I'm taking responsibility for my laptop. So first is take care that the mind works for us, not against us. And then take care that the mind works. The mind is in a working condition. So that means, what is the difference between these two things now? The first is that it said, okay, I came to my laptop because I had to read a book. But then on my laptop, some notifications come up and I got caught in the notifications. Then that instead of helping me to do my work, that laptop is working, diverting me from my work. Like that, we need the mind to function. The mind is a tool for us to connect with physical reality. So which is the part of physical reality I want to focus on? The mind should work for us, not against us. But sometimes what happens is, when we are too overloaded, when we are too exhausted, when we are too emotionally drained, then the mind may not work at all. Then we need to take some breaks. We need to calm ourselves down. Just like if the software is not working, do I need to update the software? Do I need a new app? What do I need to do? So we have to take care of both things. So that's why distancing ourselves doesn't mean rejecting the mind. It means, okay, distancing ourselves and observing and then responding appropriately. That's why the Gita says the mind can also be our friend. It's not that every thought that comes from the mind is a bad thought. It is that we have to process. We can consider two meanings of thought. Say, consider now, I just got a thought. Here there's one meaning of the word thought. Here thought idea is that something popped up in my mind. And then I have given this a lot of thought. What does this mean? In both places, we are using the word thought. I just got a thought means something popped up in my mind. Why is the spell check not on? Something popped up in my mind. And I have given this a lot of thought means I have given this I've thought systematically about it. I have analyzed, studied it, analyzed it systematically. So the idea is that we use the word thought in two senses. So combining these three, that we could say not every thought needs to be given a lot of thought. Not every thought means not everything that pops up in our mind needs to be thought about elaborately. So we are walking along, maybe you're fasting on some day, and maybe for a sacred purpose, for holy purposes, for physical health, whatever, if you're fasting, and we pass by and we see some food and we get the thought, let me eat this. Well, no, my plan is something else today. I don't have to think much about it. No, I'm not going to do it. Move on. So not every thought needs to be given a lot of thought. So that's why we need to process. And processing means, first of all, I distance myself. And then I observe, then I evaluate. Does it answer the question? Okay. Now we have others. Yes, Subudhi Madhav Prabhu.
Yeah, Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, Dandavat Pranam.
Dhanyavad.
Prabhuji, as you mentioned that physical injury is real and experience is also real. So my question is, does the soul experience the pain, or it has an illusion that he is experiencing the pain or happiness? Means soul has an illusion, or so, because soul is Sachidanand, spiritual. So it really feels pain, or it has an illusion of pain?
Okay. I'll discuss this elaborately later, but briefly speaking, that the soul is essentially defined by its consciousness. So wherever the soul is, where the consciousness is, that's what the soul experiences. So we could say at an abstract philosophical level, the soul doesn't experience anything, the soul doesn't do anything, the soul is completely different from the body. That is true at one level. At the same time, the soul is presently experiencing things. So the Bhagavad-Gita says that actually the soul is doing nothing in the material world. Prakrutyevacha karmani kriyamani sarvasha. Yah pashyata atmanam akartaram sapashyati. The wise people see that actually the soul is completely different from the body. But at the same time, the Bhagavad Gita also says it gives various processes for liberating the soul from the body. The Bhagavad Gita also says that this world is a place of distress, dukkhalaya. So if the soul is not experiencing anything right now, then what is the point of calling this world dukkhalaya? What is the point of going towards the abode, which is a place of enduring joy? So yes, in abstract philosophical sense, the soul is not experiencing anything because the soul is different from matter. But at the same time, the soul's consciousness is currently caught in matter. So to give a simple example, suppose somebody is dreaming and they are having a nightmare. Maybe in the nightmare, a tiger is chasing them. So are they actually in danger of being eaten by a tiger? No. But that's what they're experiencing at that time. And just saying, oh, actually nothing is happening to you is not going to help. They have to wake up and then they will realize, actually, there's no tiger, nothing is happening to me. But till they have woken up, that tiger is a serious threat. Now, the solution is not just fighting the tiger, the solution is waking up. The solution is waking up. So similarly, for us, we could say that, yes, the soul is not experiencing anything, but that's not a very practically helpful approach for dealing with this. And if it is taken towards an unhealthy and non-scriptural extreme, that can make people very heartless and apathetic towards other sufferings. It can make one completely bankrupt of compassion. So the practical understanding is, wherever the soul's consciousness is, that is what the soul experiences. When pain is experienced, who is experiencing it? The body is dead. The mind is also like software. It is not conscious. It is a channel for consciousness coming from the soul. So yes, at present, the pain is experienced by the soul. And to the extent the soul wakes up, the soul becomes detached from temporary things, the experience of that pain will become lesser and lesser. Thank you. Yes, Kalpana Mataji.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
As Prabhuji also mentioned that you said we have to understand that every thought is not ours. So I didn't get that exactly. If it's not ours, then whose is it?
It's popping up from the mind. See, it is I'll explain in the next session where thoughts come from. But just like in the computer software, notifications may come up. So where do the notifications come from? Wherever they come from, it's not that every notification deserves our notice. So let's take a simple example. Suppose somebody has visited a particular website, say Bollywood.com. They repeatedly visited that site. And now they come to a Bhagavad Gita class, they hear about the Bhagavad Gita, and they want to learn about the Bhagavad Gita. And then they go on Google and they want to type Bhagavad Gita. They type B. And what happens as soon as they type B, Bollywood comes up. Bollywood.com comes as the autocomplete. Now they may get, oh, Bollywood, let me see what's the latest Bollywood update, Bollywood gossip. And they may go there. But that Bollywood.com that came was not their intention. It was not their desire. Now, why did it come? Because they had visited in the past. But that doesn't mean that's what they need to visit right now. So that's why I said the thoughts that come inside us, they are often a result of what we have done in the past, what we have thought about in the past, what we have done in the past. So because we had visited Bollywood.com repeatedly, so now as soon as I type B, that comes as autocomplete. So like that, based on what we have thought in the past, many thoughts automatically come up within us. But those thoughts that come up, they are not our thoughts in the sense that that's not what I need to do right now. That's not what I need to focus on right now. So suppose somebody is alcoholic and they're trying to be sober, they're trying to do some serious work, and maybe they come to a meeting and there on the side they see a bottle of alcohol. Immediate thought comes, let me drink. Hey, I've not come here for drinking. I've come here for serious professional work. So that thought that came up, let me drink, that is not their intention. Where did it come from? That came as a you could autocomplete from their mind because of what they had done in the past. So, but they don't have to act on it right. Just because Bollywood.com has popped up in my mind, on my Google, doesn't mean I have to visit Bollywood.com. Even if B has led to Bollywood, I can type BHAG and I can go to Bhagavad-Gita.com. So that's why we need to differentiate between the thoughts that come inside us and the thoughts we act on. The two are different things. Okay, then Rina Mataji asking, then are we not responsible for the thoughts coming in our mind? We are not, I wouldn't use the word responsible. I would use the word more of, we are not defined, or we don't have to be defined by the thoughts coming in our mind. So are we not responsible? Well, in one sense, we are responsible because those thoughts have come because of what we have done in the past. So it's because of our past actions, past surfing, that Bollywood.com is coming. So I can't say I'm not responsible for Bollywood.com coming. But that doesn't mean I have to go to Bollywood.com. I don't have to be defined by the thoughts that are coming in my mind. So yes, if somebody was an alcoholic in the past and they're recovering now, even now the thought of alcohol will come in their mind. But just because the thought of alcohol has come in their mind doesn't make them an alcoholic. It's only when they act on it and drink indiscriminately, that's what will sentence them to be an alcoholic once again. So yes, nicely put. Deepak Prabhu has put that we are responsible to the way we respond to our thoughts. We'll be discussing about this, the difference between thoughts and our response to our thoughts in a later session when we talk about mindfulness. So the point is that we are not defined by the kind of thoughts that come in our mind. Okay. Yes, Sandhya Datarmataji.
Hare Krishna.
Hare
So,
Krishna.
yeah. So, the frog example that you gave, I had a similar situation. I must confess, I had an infection on my knee, and just like maybe the size of a 25 cents coin. And I don't know what happened to me. I was in anxiety or panic or what it is, but I have this medical problem where I kind of start thinking it's cancer. Yeah, so everything appears like it's cancer. I'm laughing about it right now, but it's not funny when it happens. And I started thinking that, and I just refused to go to the doctor. And I was thinking that, oh my God, this is some horrible infection. And I started searching the net and doing a lot of research about it on Google. And like they were saying things like it could be cancer, it's skin cancer, this, that. And then finally it became a stinging pain. After 4 months, I couldn't manage the pain. So I finally went to a GP and she said, it's just a bacterial infection. She gave me some cream or some kind of a lotion to put. And in 2 days, it was gone. And the kind of trauma that I lived with for the 4 months, I mean, no, I didn't have to say anything, but I was just thinking that how managing the mind is so, so important. And that frog story is very funny when we listen to it, but sometimes we are actually living that story also. And it's quite traumatizing, actually, if you ask me. It just eats you up when you're in that situation, and it just tells you how important it is to manage your mind. So if I had just gone to the doctor within a week, it could have been resolved. I mean, just the next day, it could have been resolved in 2 days, and it would have been literally nothing. So yeah, I mean,
I
just
understand.
yeah.
Of course, sometimes thank you for sharing this.
Yeah.
And sometimes some incidents, when they are you could say exaggerated to a cartoonish level, we can laugh at them.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean actually when we are going through the events, it's the same. See, there are two things. One of the we will be discussing primarily 3 things with respect to the mind. The Gita talks about Vit, Raga, Bhaya, and Krodha. That desire or attachment or anger, attachment, craving, and then Bhaya, that is fear, and then Krodha is anger. So in the next 3 sessions on mindfulness, we are going to discuss about these 3 things, how we can distance ourselves from these 3 things. So fear is a real problem, and it is not that. See, one of the fundamental problems of life is that we often have to make major decisions based on inadequate information.
Yes.
So, okay, I have this pain. What is it actually? What do I need to do? That's just a problem of life. When we choose a career, how much do we really know about what that career is going to bring? When we choose to enter into a relationship with someone, when we choose to have children, when we do various things in our life, we have finite information, but the situation can be far more complex than what we know. So in that sense, fear is natural. Fear is natural, and fear is not necessarily bad also. We'll talk about the difference between fear, and later when we talk about when we are dealing with fear, difference between fear and fearfulness. So fear is natural in one sense. It actually can protect us from danger also. So, but it is when we become dominated by fear, that's when it becomes problematic.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
So why do we get consumed like this? Like why does it feel like something that is so false? Why does it feel so real? Like,
well, it is. I won't say it is false entirely. It was something which had the possibility of being a reality. So it's natural that it was not a reality at that time. It had the possibility of being a reality. So it's natural that there will be some apprehension. So now, yes, we will discuss when we deal with fear. We'll talk about how to avoid being consumed by it. But it is not unnatural. It is the fact that we are vulnerable living beings. Our bodies are destructible. That naturally results in certain amount of fear. So we will discuss about this more.
And mainstream medical science is something to be extremely wary of. Oftentimes I have seen you giving examples of how doctors tell you something and how we need to follow it, kind of a thing. But of course, I get the analogy that you're trying to present, but I have an extreme fear / wariness / distaste for mainstream medical profession, because it can be I've had bad experiences as well. So
see, I would say that there are 3 different things over here. One is doctors as individuals. Second is medical science. Third is the medical establishment. And then the 4th is the big pharma as a business.
Yes.
So medical science has its utility. There's a lot of hard work done, and there's a lot of useful knowledge available there. As far as medical individual doctors are concerned, they're just like all other human beings. Many of them are good. Many of them are there just for money. Many of them are out for making money at the expense of the patients. All variety of human beings are there. Now, when the medical establishment comes in, what happens is the tendency of every institute is try to centralize power and protect itself. So then even if there are good doctors, they may not always be able to do good things within the because of the medical establishment.
Right.
And then beyond that, there's a big pharma. So
Yes.
big pharma is actually out to make
Horrible.
money.
Yes.
That is their primary purpose. So
Yes.
for doctors, some of them may have some compassionate motives, but very few people who are in the pharma business have compassionate motives. For them, medicine is just a way for making money. So when
That
you
is
have
true.
all these four together, it becomes it can become quite problematic. And some of
Right.
us may have had very bad experiences also. That's understandable.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So thank you. So there are a couple of
Thank
questions
you.
we'll take.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Hare Krishna.
Yeah. Hare Krishna. Yeah.
Yes, Shri Radhika Mataji.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu Dandavat Pranam.
Dandavat, Hare Krishna.
I just wanted to ask you, you were mentioning earlier about how the thoughts that are coming up, yes, you're right that we don't have to pay attention to every thought, but you said that the thoughts are coming up from the mind. So basically, are you saying that the thoughts that come up are due to our purva samskaras that are in the mind, and therefore we need to create new samskaras to overwrite whatever thoughts are coming up, which may not be so good?
Yes, that's true. Basically, the thoughts that pop up inside us are an unpredictable combination of outer perceptions and inner impressions. I'll explain that a little later when we discuss the next session, especially we talk about fear. But let's illustrate it simply. Say, if somebody has been traumatized by fear, maybe by fire, traumatized with fear because of fire. Maybe when they were a small child, they were in a burning house and they saw others burning, and at the last moment they were saved. So what happens is, when they see fire somewhere, or let's take, some people have PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. So they hear some sudden banging sound. You think, is this a bombshell? Is this a bullet? They get overwhelmed. So what has happened over there is that, yes, there is some perception from outside. There is an outer perception, but for them, maybe they were in some conflict, in some war or something like that, and they saw bombs blasting. So there is an impression created inside them. So what happens for each one of us? 10 people may hear the sudden sound. The sound might be just some vessel falling somewhere, or some big suitcase falling, or maybe a building being demolished. So it may be a loud sound also, but that doesn't mean this person is immediately in danger. So 10 people may hear the same sound. The outer perception is coming, but each of them may have different mental impressions.
Yes.
So when we experience something, the meaning we assign to something is based on, and you could say, as an individual and unpredictable combination of outer perception and inner impression. Say if somebody is into the construction business and they wanted to have flat land, and there is a rocky outcropping that is obstructing them, and they had set some detonators over there, and now when they hear the explosion, they'll just clap hands and wave and cheer. Why? Because now construction path has become clear for them. But somebody else may become horrified. So it depends on what is inside the person. So the thoughts that come for us, for each one of us, it is a individual and unpredictable combination of outer perceptions and inner impressions. And that's why each of us may have to process it differently. We may have to learn individually the skills for processing it. So some perceptions may be very difficult for one person to process, and they may be relatively easy for others to process, because it's impressions, because the impressions are different. So it's not only the impressions, it's the impressions and the perceptions both combined together. Okay.
Thank you, Prabhu. Nicely explained. So we have the experience that most of the time the mind tends to come up with a lot of negative thoughts. So is that due to the impressions that we're carrying, the samskaras that we're having, or is it that the mind is just designed to be negative in the way it works? Or is it a combination of the two as well?
Well, we will discuss about negative thinking a little bit later. See, first of all, negative thinking itself is not bad. Being controlled by negative thinking is bad. See, negative thinking means what? It is just, okay, in every situation, there are problems that might come up. In every situation, there are potentials that are there. So for example, if somebody wants to say, there's somebody got a flat patch of land and they want to build a big building over there. Now, one essential part of building a building, of constructing a building, is to actually have safety measures. If a fire occurs, what is the escape way? What are the things? Now, somebody has to think about all that.
Yes.
And in one sense, the capacity to envision problems. Why are you so negative? Somebody may say. No, that is also essential. Actually, the capacity to envision and anticipate problems, that is also a skill.
Yes.
That is also a skill. Say, for example, I've written many books. So in writing, there is a creative side when we write, and then there's the critical side where we edit. So when we're editing, hey, this could mean this, and this is how people may read this. Oh, then we need to reword it. So in one sense, being able to analyze what all may go wrong, that is also a skill, and some people are gifted with that skill. So and that is also a valuable skill. But the problem is when negative thinking becomes the only way we think. So there is negative thinking, and we could say there is a negative thinker. So a person who is habitually thinking negative. Say, for example, many times devotees ask me to review their writings. Now, depending on which forum they are trying to publish, I will give reviews accordingly. The fact that somebody is writing itself, trying to share Krishna's message by writing, I'm happy about that. And I appreciate that. But say if I am the editor for a particular magazine, if I am editing for Back to Godhead, then I may say, okay, if you want to publish in Back to Godhead, you have to fix this. So if I started a habit, if somebody is just written their first piece, and they're just happy that they wrote something down, and I take the Back to Godhead standard and I say, this is not right, this is not right, this is not right. What are you doing over here? Then what has happened is I have become a habitually negative thinker. So all of us, some of us may naturally tend to think positive, and actually always thinking positive is not necessarily a good thing. There's something like being Pollyannish or unrealistically optimistic. Not seeing problems at all. That's not healthy.
Yes.
Because if there are dangers, somebody invests in a very risky venture, say, no, I'll become a millionaire by this. No, you can become a pauper. Do you really want to invest in this? Do you want to take that risk? So thinking about problems is not itself bad. It is only when that becomes the default way, that becomes the only way we start thinking, that is a problem. So both. So we may, by our past impressions, past experiences, all of us may have one particular way of thinking as more natural for us. And that's not a bad thing if we can distance ourselves from it and say, okay, this is a resource. I should use it, but I should not let it define me. Some people are natural risk takers. Some people are natural safety providers, safety seekers. And for functioning in life, both are required.
Yes.
So it's only when we identify, again, the problem is, one thing which you can carry home from this session is that we need to identify the mind, not identify with the mind.
Yes.
Okay, this is the way my mind thinks. And then let me see how I can use it. Don't identify with the mind. This is not who I am. My mind tends to think negative, but that doesn't make me a negative thinker. Okay?
You're so gifted and blessed with the ability to explain everything so clearly. Thank you so much, Prabhu. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Happy to be of service. Thank you for that thoughtful question.
Hare Krishna.
So thank you. We will have 2-3 more questions and we'll stop. Yes. Divya Srivastava Mataji, did you ask? I don't think till now.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. I actually had a question, something related to the previous question, actually. So how does one actually distinguish between, actually when the mind is trying to be careful versus extrapolating a possible danger to a point where it could be,
Yeah, we will be discussing that in the future session. We'll be discussing that in the future
Okay.
session. But broadly speaking, just recognizing that I am different from the mind, that itself helps. So one of the things that the Bhagavad Gita repeatedly tells us is to distance ourselves from the mind, treat the mind like a person different from you. So if somebody came and told us, this investment is very good, invest here. Or this investment is terrible, don't invest over here. Now, we won't just accept either person's words as gospel truth, as Ved Vakya. Okay, if that's what you're saying, why are you saying this? Let me evaluate. So that's where intelligence comes in. That's where processing comes in. So we'll discuss about that later. Okay. Now there are a few other questions. Yes, Abhishek Prabhu. There is a question about impressions in the chat. We'll talk about impressions more in a future session and how to deal with them also. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Like my question was, as you said that the consciousness is controlled by the soul, and later the mind, and later the physical world. So how we can that beautifully, or like how we can arrange them in order, or how we can enrich the power of our soul to operate all these three parts of our world or the reality, that we can live a better life. Like how we can enrich the power of the soul.
That's what we will discuss case by case in future sessions. We'll talk about what three major things which cause disorder, and then we'll discuss about how to bring them to order. Okay. So broadly speaking, if we situate ourselves at the spiritual level, then we can observe our mind and then we can manage it properly. Yes, Sampath Kumar Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
So you started that topic with the soul being the root of consciousness and mind being the carrier of the soul, energy of the soul. So could you please explain it a little bit more, how and why this soul?
So what is it that is not clear? I gave the example of the mobile flashlight. You were there at that time? So that the mobile,
yes.
So what exactly is not clear? Then I can explain.
Root of consciousness, soul being the root of consciousness. That is not coming very clearly.
So root means source. It is from the soul consciousness comes. See, consciousness is the capacity to be aware, to experience emotions, to have the to have the free will to make choices about how to act. So those three things, to become aware, to experience, and then to choose a response. Those are the thinking, feeling, and willing. You could say broadly. They cannot happen without consciousness. So matter does not have consciousness. The matter cannot experience matter. A robot may do many of the things that we do. A robot may even defeat a world chess champion. Deep Blue did that to Gary Kasparov. But Gary Kasparov at the end of it was dejected. But the robot had no emotion. The robot's creators were delighted that our computer defeated the world chess champion. But the robot was just going through a mechanical steps at a very fast level of processing, but it's just going through mechanical steps. So consciousness is what enables us to experience, to choose, to perceive in a way that we can experience and choose. So that consciousness does not have any material source. Matter is ultimately made just of atoms and molecules. Whether we go down to electrons, neutrons, and going down further to subatomic particles. None of them have anything to do with consciousness. So consciousness is a different reality, and it comes from a source different from matter. That is the soul. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Prabhuji.
Thank you, Hare Krishna. So now, is the constructive or destructive meaning that we make through the mind, is that determined? Is this either positive or negative, located in the brain in medical terminology? See, there is a tendency in neuroscience to make itself the supreme science. Every science tries that. And some people say that everything about human behavior can be explained through the brain. Well, a lot we can explain, but not everything. There is, yes, our brain may get wired in a particular way and rewired in a particular way. There are brain cells called neurons, and then they link with each other at points called synapses. So for different people, their brains are wired in different ways. So if somebody is an addict, their brain gets wired in a different way. Somebody is not somebody is focusing on some other thing, their brain gets wired in a different way. But that's just the way the body is. If somebody is in athletic activities, their physical muscles will get wired in a different way. If somebody is more in a sedentary profession, their physical muscles get arranged in a different way. So that doesn't mean that that particular alignment is the source of this. It is a result of this. Now I'll explain. So this might be a little technical, but I'll conclude with this point that there is correlation and there is causation. Correlation means A happens along with B, or A happens after B. But that doesn't mean that B caused A. So for example, sociologists have found that people with bigger hands have bigger vocabularies. They have found that people with bigger hands have bigger vocabularies. Say, really? Okay. We all start looking at our hands. How does this determine my vocabulary? Now, but what is happening is that this does not mean that bigger hands cause bigger vocabularies. What they meant is that people who have bigger hands are older people. And older people, somebody who is 20, 30, 40 will have a bigger vocabulary than somebody who's 2, 3, 4, 5. So bigger hands and bigger vocabularies, they are correlated, but they are not causal. It is when a person is bigger, they have both bigger hands and bigger vocabularies. So this is correlation. So quite often correlation is mistaken to be causation. So yes, so if somebody is habitually thinking negative, yes, their brain may be wired in a particular way. But that is a correlation. It is not the causation. It is, yes, the brain is a tool, and the way we want to function, we regularly function, the tool reshapes itself in that way. But the reshaping of the tool is not the cause of that particular behavior. We as conscious beings exist separate from the brain, and we function using the brain. So the way we function, the brain reshapes itself accordingly. And that's why the brain might be ordered differently for different people, but that is not the cause. There is more of a correlation, or we could say that is the effect of a cause that is beyond itself. So there is Nobel laureate neuroscientist, neurosurgeon, who has talked about how the brain is actually not the source of consciousness. So he's a Canadian neuroscientist. So what he did was he focused more on trying to determine which part of the brain causes what effect. So Dr. Wilder Penfield, he had probes installed in the brains of patients, and he observed so that, okay, when a person raises their hand, which part of the brain is activated? When the person lowers their hand, how that part of the brain gets deactivated? And based on that, he decided that, okay, let's analyze more. So he decided that, okay, let me stimulate that part of the brain by external electrode. And when that happened, the person's hand rose. And he asked the subject, what happened? He says, my hand went up. Did you raise your hand? Subject said, no, I didn't. You did. When they deactivated that part of the brain, the hand fell down. So did you lower your hand? No, I didn't. You did. So then, while repeating this activation of that part of the brain, Dr. Penfield, he activated many other parts of the brain. But no matter whichever part of the brain he activated, I'm showing the head because the brain is in the cranial cavity, but whichever part of the brain he activated, no part of the brain's activation gave the patient a sense of agency. Yes, now I'm acting. There are different responses that came, but they were just responses that were coming. So his conclusion was that the brain is like a computer, but it's programmed programmer exists outside it. So to understand what is happening is, so the brain, as I said, the brain is like a tool. Just like the mind is a tool, the brain is also a tool. So if I have a laptop and on the attached to the laptop, I have a printer. Then if I press the print button, then the printer's hand will start moving and the printing will start happening on the paper. Okay. So now, similarly, what is happening is a particular part of the brain controls the arm motion. So when that part of the brain is activated, that's like pressing the print screen button or print button, and then the hand starts going up or coming down. Now my computer might be here in front of me, but you can come and press the print button. Now when you press the print button, also the printer's hand will start moving. But if you ask me, okay, did you cause that printer hand to move? No, I didn't, you did. So that's what is happening. The brain is a tool. So, but the person who is using that tool is different from the brain. That's why there is a level of reality beyond this. Okay. So hope that is clear. This last question, Harsha Prabhu, then we'll stop. Thank you, Amritmay Mataji, for your comment. Yes, maybe in Govardhan Eco Village we'll plan Hindi sessions. Generally, we have in English here, but I'll mention this feedback to the organizers. Thank you.
Can you hear me? Can you hear?
Yes.
Can you hear me, Prabhuji?
Yes.
Prabhuji, thank you very much. I was just asking regarding this mind concept. Does our spiritual body has a mind? If I don't know if answer is yes or no. And if no, then why do we need a mind at first place in the material body?
So let's focus on questions on the session that we are discussing right now.
Okay,
let's not get into those questions.
Okay, no problem. Thank you, Prabhuji.
The spiritual body has a mind of its own. In the spiritual domain, there is no difference between body, mind, and soul. So for functioning in the world, functioning anywhere, we need tools. So for functioning in the world, the spiritual soul needs a tool. That is the body and the mind.
Yeah. So coming to the context of this class, so you were saying impression and perception. So aren't stimulus also important? Because stimulus when
perceptions come from stimulus. So the stimulus is out there, but that's what enters into our consciousness, then we call it as perception.
Yeah, so like why I was saying when we see a knife, so if we see a knife and as a neutral stimulus, because as children are learning, they don't know it is wrong or right.
Okay.
So it's a neutral stimulus. Now the perception is given it is bad or wrong, that it will be harmful or it will be like whatever emotion associated with it, that is that we should be fearful, as you said, if there's a loud sound, the civil engineer will be happy and the person who has suffered will be strong. Then the perception is something added to the stimuli which gets stored, because taxonomically my brain is like activated by hearing the word impression and perception, because they are different, but I never thought so. Hence I was just going, and if it is out of the context, we can park the question.
Okay. Now once we go into terms, there could be a lot of difference. And so I am using the word perception simply in terms of external stimuli coming, or I could say external information coming inside. So basically two things. Something comes from outside, something comes from inside. And the two are combined together, and that's how we assign meaning.
Why I'm saying this, because we've seen that even if we see same environment, same stimulus, we might focus on different part of the stimulus. Like I might be focusing on
so I would say that is because of the impressions inside us.
Yeah, so
what I'm saying is perception simply means the external information that comes in. So I come into a house. If I'm an architect, I will look at the architectural strength of the house. If I'm a potential buyer of the house, I may look at the aesthetics of the house. If I'm a criminal, I may look at, is there a place for me to hide in the house?
Yeah.
So we may all look at differently. So I'm using it perception simply means the fact that I'm in the house right now. Okay. So the external data that is coming into us, where we focus, how we process, how we respond, all of that is a result after that.
Yes, Prabhuji.
Now it can happen unconsciously also, but and it can happen reflectively so fast that we don't even realize that we are focusing on particular things.
And
But
lastly, Prabhuji,
that is a result of the impressions. That is the
yeah. And lastly, Prabhuji, whatever you are going to tell in these classes of mindfulness, is this will be documented somewhere, or is it compiled somewhere? Because I read the article of ventriloquist of by you on Mind, but I don't know if it is have it at one place, so that we can refer to it and
okay.
learn more
So
on
the
it.
current session is based on one of my latest books, the Bhagavad-Gita for Daily Mindfulness. We'll send you a link to you for that book. So not everything that I'm going to talk is covered in this, but almost 70 to 80% what I'm talking is covered in that book in different articles.
Okay, Bhagavad-Gita. Okay, thank you.
We'll send you a link for that in the next session.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Srimad Bhagavad-Gita ki jai. Shri Prabhupada ki jai. Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. If there are any remaining questions, we'll discuss in a future session. Thank you very much for joining today and for your thoughtful participation. Hare Krishna. So in the next 3 sessions, we'll be discussing about how to deal with craving, desire, and how to deal with fear, and how to deal with anger by becoming more mindful. Thank you. Hare Krishna.